pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
If you didn't sign the sheet and you'd like to speak, just raise your hand when we finish this list, and we're happy to have you come up.
Hey, maybe before we get started here, I would like to take a minute to thank Brian Burns for his time on our board
Welcome.
and the fact that he made it here tonight.
I knew it was too good.
I think I'm losing a bet on this, but you know what? I enjoyed the years that we worked together. I'm going to miss you.
Thank you very much.
I think
Same here.
we accomplished.
Well, from all of us to you,
Oh,
we have a little something for you to enjoy.
I'll open
And I
that a little
especially
later.
want to thank you because I love my little gifts every week, every other week. The fish.
It's not ticking, is it? Thank you
No,
so
but-
much, guys.
But
I
thank you
appreciate
very much
that.
for being on the Education Committee and for helping me and to teach me, and I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
So, wherever you're going and whatever you're going to do, good luck from all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
It's
My
been great.
pleasure.
6
For
years.
the clam contest, right?
Next year?
What's next on the agenda? Now, it's all been good. It's, Trustees is a wonderful opportunity to learn about our waters and the properties we own, and of course, one of the biggest things is the history of our town and how fascinating it is. And it's been a pleasure. Quickest 6 years, I think, of my life. And like any political job, it's really good when it's good. All right, thank you.
Arlene, can you do roll call, please?
Sure. John Aldred, Francis Bach,
Here.
Brian Burns,
Here.
Bill Cullum, Rick Drew,
Here.
Jim Grimes,
Here.
Susan McGraw Keeper,
Here.
Bill Taylor,
Here.
Susan Vorpal. Thank you.
All right, we'll start with public comment. First on the list, Kurt Shade.
So I'll make a few brief comments as a follow-up to the discussion about the Scout program that we had last week, and to give the trustees a brief update on where the tenure review process stands and the input needed, and the next steps, as well as some of the thoughts of the recreational boating community regarding the Scout leases in East Hampton. As you may know, for most of 2019, Suffolk County's been gathering input from a broad base of constituents regarding the aquaculture programs in Peconic and Gardner's Bay. And last Wednesday, November 20th, the county's consultant presented a number of maps, which they are creating based on the input of all groups impacted by the Scout program, including fishermen, recreational boaters, the marine industry, oyster farmers, and environmental groups. The purpose of creating these updated maps is to provide the county with comprehensive input regarding where to best locate aquaculture leases and what types of gear should be used in specific lease sites. The consultants asked that any additional input to these maps be received within 30 days of last Wednesday's meeting, which means additional comments reflecting the views of the residents of East Hampton should be submitted by December 20th, a little more than 3 weeks from today. The residents of East Hampton have two representatives on the county's tenure review committee, John Aldred, appointed by the clerk of the trustees, and Barley Dunn, appointed by Supervisor Van Squake. This same map creation process took place a little over a decade ago, and at that time, Stuart Heath of the East Hampton Baymen's Association and John Aldred were appointed to represent the interest of East Hampton residents. The map created 10 years ago resulted in the location of 22 lease sites in the town of East Hampton, based exclusively on the input of the Baymen. And as a result of this partial and incomplete input, lease sites were located in areas with very heavy boat traffic and long-standing significant recreational usage. The omission of other groups' input resulted in lease locations based only on the comments from one group, and has created the conflicts we have today. Fortunately, we now have an opportunity to correct this and provide more incomplete input to the county to use to adjust the lease sites. The omission of input regarding navigational conflicts 10 years ago may have occurred because at the time, the assumption was these leases would employ gear located on the bottom of the bay, with only occasional marker buoys on the surface, as opposed to surface gear sites, which would give over hundreds of acres of public surface waters to for-profit businesses. To quote the county's own program management guide, which you can pull up online, the cages are typically made of metal and are stacked together and placed on the bay bottom. They're connected to a line and a single marker float to enable retrieval. The cages are periodically pulled to the surface by a small boat equipped with a power winch, and the oysters are checked, sorted, and removed if of harvestable size. The cages, then cleaned, are returned back to the bay bottom. So clearly that was the intent at the time. The document goes on to say that shellfish operations on leases issued under the program will generally not be apparent to casual observers. All equipment, such as shellfish cages, will be below the surface of the water. Keeping gear in the bottom is one way to avoid conflicts with other users of public waters, and the majority of the installed oyster farms in the county's program today, in fact, use equipment on the bottom. However, recently, floating gear has become the preferred method for some oyster farmers because it requires less labor and the oysters attain market size faster. We respect their desire to use floating gear, but if it's to be used, suitable locations that don't conflict with other uses or create navigational hazards should be found. And John and Barley's upcoming recommendations to the county must reflect this reality. 10 years ago, the fishing industry rejected any lease sites in areas where they actively fish, and we respect their right to insist upon public access to town waters. Similarly, we want to make sure that the recommendations of our appointed representatives also reflect the rights of the many residents, marine industry business owners, and users of the bay to reject floating lease sites where they conflict with public access to our heavily used recreational areas of the bay. This is an eminently fixable problem if we limit floating gear to sites with less navigational conflict and mandate gear on the bottom as originally intended in busier, more heavily used areas. Hopefully the county will listen and act on the town's recommendations as they did over 10 years ago. I want to emphasize John and Barley have been very receptive to our concerns, and we've appreciated their willingness to meet and find solutions, and we've met really exhaustively with them, and they have a very clear idea of our views. However, last Wednesday's meeting, when asked by the 10-year review advisory chair what his input for the town of East Hampton was, John Aldred read an email from Brad Lowen, chair of the Fisheries Advisory Committee, dated June 24th, 2019, which stated there should be no additional lease sites anywhere in the town of East Hampton until the existing lease sites are filled. We have no issue with Brad's rejections of leases anywhere there is commercial fishing activity, but we have a big problem with mandating the filling of improperly located lease sites unless it's clarified they must use gear that's on the bottom. It's of great concern to us that John did not represent our input last week, and there's no reason after all these hearings that we need to have a rerun of the incomplete input we had a decade ago. Since John's been appointed to speak for the trustees, his omission last week likely reflects that he needs to know what the trustees are thinking on this matter. It certainly wasn't because he doesn't know our issues. Additionally, it does not appear that John and Barley have provided any input from the perspective of the town into the draft map that the county is producing. We encourage them to do so prior to the map input period being closed out in 3 weeks. In closing, in searching for a solution, I have looked at how other states that have floating gear aquaculture have been thinking about where they site these leases. I quote the South Carolina Department of Natural Resource Management team that oversees their very successful oyster farming industry. Quote, "It's very important to involve the public. These are public waterways after all. The 3 regulatory bodies who oversee the permitting and management of the oyster farming industry must consider not only the well-meaning small business owner, they're also considering how the implementation of these water farms will affect navigation, natural resources, public access, and more. These 3 agencies working together also gives them an opportunity to have more than one avenue for public information. We ask that our appointed representatives, John and Barley, fully communicate our input to the county, and we ask the county, DEC, and Army Corps of Engineers to work together, as they do in other states, to find locations that work for both oyster farmers and other users of our bays. The 10-year review process affords us the opportunity to correct the mistakes made a decade ago, and with careful, inclusive planning, we can create a more collegial and successful aquaculture industry in East Hampton. So let's not squander the opportunity the county is giving us to get this right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Kurt.
you.
Thank you.
Joan Priori?
Good evening. I'd like to begin by giving credit where credit is due. The Scout Board has done everything it possibly could to gather input from a multitude of focus groups and interested parties. They listened intently to concerns, and now it is time for them to put it all together and come up with a new plan going forward. Now that they are coming down to the wire, they deserve as much help as they can get. To their credit, they are putting 6 maps on their website and asking all focus groups and interested parties to check to see if their concerns have been addressed, and if not, say so. Here, there will also be a follow-up meeting, probably at the end of January, to check with everyone again to make sure they're getting things right. Because they've shown genuine interest in developing a new plan that will be best for all concerned, they need and deserve that the input they get is based on reality, not false hopes and expectations. If they are provided with inaccuracies, they cannot accomplish what they have intended. Therefore, I think it is the obligation of the trustees and the town board to provide Scout with an honest and accurate assessment of the Scout program as it currently applies to East Hampton, and what will work best for the future. In mulling this over, here is what I see as the bottom line regarding Scout in East Hampton. Is there any real reason anyone can provide to justify Scout's existence in Gardiner's Bay? Just being dedicated to the concept of aquaculture is not sufficient. What concrete evidence can be put forth that Scout has been of any benefit? I don't believe there is any. That is the reality. So perhaps the trustees should not decide to support it, even if it would be bottom farming, even if you say that that would be what would solve the problem. It would eliminate the use of surface equipment. Now, there are people who dispute this, but unfortunately, when I asked one of the Scout board members, DeWitt Davies, if they had any control over where within the water column they could tell a farmer to farm, he said they did not. So as far as regulating it to bottom farming, that's off the table, unless I'm wrong. Is Scout going to provide a decent living for any oyster farmer? Probably not. Is there one shred of evidence Scout has improved the local economy over the past 10 years? I doubt it. So the goals set forth by the state have never been achieved. Scout has never done a cost-benefit study. Maybe that's because it has been all cost and no benefit. Are oysters going to clean a bay that needs no cleaning? Barley Dunn said, "Gardeners is a terrible place for oyster farming. The water gets too rough. Gardeners is not actually a bay. It's an arm of the Atlantic Ocean, and when storms hit, it looks like the Atlantic Ocean." The manufacturers say that surface gear is best used in calm waters. Scout suspended leasing for 2019, but in 2018, no potential farmer had requested any sites in Gardeners. What do the farmers know that officials do not? Should Scout be led to believe a miracle will occur and will suddenly breathe life into a 10-year failure? Countywide, over the past 10 years, 56 sites were leased out. About a dozen have survived. The rest have been abandoned or are in default. But in case a miracle should occur, Gardiner's Bay will be faced with a huge problem. How will East Hampton deal with 22 10-acre lease sites taking up 440 acres of public water, potentially containing 22,000 metal cages and 44,000 pontoons, which will create very serious hazards to navigation, obstruct recreation, and despoil scenic views. Aquaculture is great, provided it serves a valid purpose and is conducted in the right place using the appropriate equipment and is not going to interfere with the public's rights to use the water. Gardiner's Bay is not the right place. Scalp needs help to realize that keeping the program in Gardiner's Bay on life support is not justified. The trustees hopefully will see it is their obligation to paint an accurate picture of the potential for Scalp success in Gardiner's Bay, so that when Scalp finalizes their plan for the future, it will portray the realities, not false hopes and expectations that will never come to pass. I think that is pretty much the bottom line. I think, considering how diligent the Scalp board has been working to get things right, it would be doing them a disservice to give them false hopes. I hope the trustees might just possibly agree with this assessment and tell John to advise Scalp that in the opinion of the trustees, Gardiner's Bay is a very poor choice for aquaculture. There should be no axes to grind here. The main objective should be to do what is best for East Hampton and help Scalp get their new plan right. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Peter Mendelman.
Hi.
Chris, you want me to assist there if needed? Sure.
I think most of you, Peter Mendelman, I'm a member of a business that operates 4 marinas in 3 Mile Harbor. I'm an avid boater, fisherman. I used to windsurf about 50 pounds ago, but reiterate, most of you have seen this picture, but maybe the public has not. This is a cage. This is about the size of, say, Linehead Rock. There's another rock that's about a 1/4 mile off Cedar Point, which everybody seems to find, not everybody, a person once a year seems to find it and hit it with their boat, even though it's marked by a single green marker buoy that's on the charts, on all the GPS charts. So when we talk about the risk of having a problem navigationally, it's not about the number of acres or the square footage that's covered. It's about the fact that you're out on the water and you can't see these things. Where are the anchors? There. Now, when you approach, yeah, that's okay.
That was it?
It was supposed to be on repeat, and it wasn't supposed to have volume. When you approach these buoys, I'm going to hand out 4 copies of these. Maybe you guys can share. When you approach these pictures were taken in sequence on the day of Hurricane Dorian starting to blow through. It was still relatively calm. There weren't even really white caps. But these pictures were taken about 60 seconds apart on a Grady White doing about 20, 25 miles an hour. In the first picture at the top, if you really look very, very carefully, you might see some black dots near the horizon. In the second picture, the black dots are actually a little bit closer. In the third picture at the bottom, over the bow rail, you maybe see some black dots. Those are the cages. And then in the fourth picture, this is taken from the side of the boat. In the fifth picture, on the next page, that's the yellow marker buoy. There are 4 of those that mark each corner. They're not lit. They don't tell you which direction to go, port or starboard. They don't tell you that there are a row of cages that are equivalent to rocks sitting in the middle that you could hit at 20, 30 miles an hour. If you hit that cage at 20, 30 miles an hour, it's going to hurt. People are going to fly forward into the windshield. Teeth are going to get broken. We've seen it happen. None of these buoys and none of these cages are marked on any of the charts. And there's no intention for them to be. I went to the public meeting in January where all of our concerns were expressed to Scout. The Scout officials said they heard us. The proof is going to be in the pudding with these maps. When they took the input 10 years ago, they located these leases right at the mouth between Shelter Island and the lighthouse when you go towards Greenport. Those lease sites are still there. They made sense 10 years ago. You heard what Kurt said. They were supposed to be on the bottom. When you hit a lobster pot buoy or a whelk pot buoy, it's a styrofoam football attached with a line to the bottom. It bounces off the boat. If you're not lucky, it'll wrap up around your prop. But it's not going to slam the boat to a halt and punch a hole in it. These cages will. So I think it's important for you to recognize that there is a real issue here. I think it's important for John and Barley to hear from you and the town board that there are issues that need to be expressed to Suffolk County. We have done so. I went in January. The Association of Marine Industries, which represents about 100 marinas, has a member on the 10-year advisory board where we're trying to articulate the concerns that there is a real conflict with public use out on the water from floating gear. My personal perspective is I think it would be great to have lots of aquaculture sites on the bottom. I don't share the perspective. I think this is still a emerging baby, if you will, that could grow into something positive for the community. But the floating surface gear is a real problem. When we went back for the focus group that Suffolk County held in April, 4 months after the East Hampton town meeting, it was not productive, is I guess the most positive thing I could say about it. The Coast Guard representative there had no idea that floating gear was basically being put in active motoring channels, had no plan for lighting or providing input to the chart makers to put this kind of obstruction on their maps. And there still doesn't seem to be a plan. The simplest thing to do when there's that much uncertainty and that much potential bureaucracy is to do the easy thing, which is to ban it, or to make a clear statement that, look, in public waters, aquaculture needs to be on the bottom where it has the least impact. It really resolves the problem. I will also echo that leaving that meeting, speaking to Sarah and Susan Filipowicz, Sarah Lansdale is the Director of Planning for Suffolk County, and Susan Filipowicz, and talking to some of their people, it became very clear to me that the enabling legislation at Suffolk County has no ability, as you mentioned, for the Suffolk County Planning Department to dictate where in the water column it lays. What's needed as part of this 10-year review process is for the Suffolk County legislators to actually enable the planners and the regulators to dictate where in the column it has to be. In the absence of that enabling legislation, it should be banned, because you have to be able to control it. You have to, so basically, I'm trying to ask the board, I think John and Barley are both great guys, they're in a tough position, and they're asking for your input, kind of some sort of vote, and the time frame is short to get it finally in. The maps are posted. We'll have maybe one, at the most two if we come back in January and they open things up again, shots to get this right. And the board owes a duty to the public to articulate the concerns carefully and crisply to the Suffolk County folks as to what needs to be done. Okay?
Peter, one question. Is there any insurance on the aquaculture cages or the aquaculturists? Does anyone know? There's none.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I would state that, you know, our contracts, when we have boats at our docks, which is a fairly low-risk situation, we ask everybody, we require by contract that they carry liability insurance. If the boat sinks, who's going to clean it up? This kid that washed up on the beach, right, in the sailboat, bought the boat on eBay. I think the town's fronting to the tune of 10, 20 grand the cleanup costs. Hopefully the moorings for the trustees require liability insurance. I'm not aware of Suffolk County requiring liability insurance from the leaseholders. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. They do not. You asked the question.
The question was asked. They do not require any insurance.
So, you know, who's going to pay when there's a negligent death suit?
Yeah.
The county will. We will. The taxpayers will. And it's a real risk. It is a real risk, so.
I have a question to my colleagues. I forgot just how much, on behalf of the people of East Hampton, do we own in terms of the bottom land, and is what Peter's referring to, would we just be perhaps an agreeing board sympathetic to what they're trying to get accomplished? That's not our bottom land, is it?
We're being asked, we were invited to have a representative on the county's review board.
Okay.
And I chose John to do that because he was on the original board. So they're giving us the opportunity to have a say.
Okay, no, that's great, okay.
Brian, I would say we probably have more fishing rights and navigable water rights than ownership rights in that area.
Peter, when is the next Scout meeting on a county level?
I guess
The end of January.
from what they've said.
But I think the cutoff date is what's more important. You know, it's not April, it's December 20th.
on this map,
By
December 20th.
December
Okay.
20th.
And that map, by the way, that we're supposed to comment on,
No,
it
Vincent talked to
has
us.
no, it doesn't say you can't put floating cages right outside Accabonac Harbor, right outside 3 Mile Harbor, right where the boats go out heavily trafficked. It doesn't have inputs. That's why I said my most positive comment about the focus group process that resulted in this is it's been somewhat unproductive. They're trying very hard, but they need to use some common sense to take all of those, I don't know if you've shown this, but that map is gobbledygook to me when I first looked at it.
Just,
So, all good?
All good. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
My name is Vincent Priori. I just want to add one comment. I spoke this morning to Susan Filipovich of the, she's on the Scout Committee, and I asked her specifically about the maps. And I said, when will they be available? When can we see them? She said, I'm working now on putting a PDF file of these 6 maps on their website. When those maps are available on the website, there will be 30 days for public comment regarding what's on the maps or what people that are involved in those focus groups feel have been left off. From there, they're going to take that information and then besides that and whatever. And she said probably sometime towards the end of January, they would have another advisory group meeting or perhaps a focus group meeting where they meet with individual focus groups. But That's where it stands right now. You'll probably, if anybody cares to go on the Scout website, you will eventually see those 6 maps, 30 days from when they appear. That comment period ends.
It just sounds like there's 2 different deadlines here, so.
Well,
At the meeting, initially she said 30 days after when the maps go up, and then she corrected it when I was there. She said, no, 30 days from today.
well, I spoke to her this morning.
Yeah, I know, but everyone at the meeting thinks it's 30 days from
I
now.
understand, I understand.
It's time for us to provide some input.
Right. I mean, whether it's 30 days from November 20th or 30 days from November 27th, I don't think is they're looking for comment, and they're looking for comment
We
as
just like to
soon as
get it in on time, I guess.
Yeah.
That's the
I
bottom line.
think this has been good. Vince, I met with you and Joan and Francis at our office, but I'm going to be honest, as a board member here, I haven't been involved with SCALP. I've been kind of not intentionally out of the loop, but, this has been done in committee. And I think personally, what's needed is one, I think John should be at the meeting. Maybe we can budget time at our next meeting to have a dialogue between, maybe get Barley here, to have a dialogue. I do think the trustees should have a definitive position on this. We can't let this get ruled by default, and I think we should have some sort of position on this, whether it is supporting SCALP in its present form, or whether it's supporting sunken gear, or whether it's a decision that as a board, we make that says we're not in favor of it. But I think this is something that should be decided not solely by the committee, but by the entire board. And certainly, it's been beneficial to have all of you guys show up at these meetings. Mrs. Piori? Just try not to touch anything while you're on.
I think one thing that John did make clear, I think, at the last meeting, he said, I'm the messenger. I'm not the decider, or something to that effect. It's not up to John, it's not up to Barley to decide what to tell SCALP. It's up to the trustees and the town board to tell them. And quite frankly, the public knows nothing about SCALP. I have asked people, and they always say, SCALP, you mean scallops? I'm like, no, SCALP. They have no clue.
Thought I was
This
buying
is
tickets
like
to
a secret.
Springsteen show.
Pardon me?
Thought I was buying tickets to a Springsteen show.
Scalping tickets.
So this has been like a big secret, except for a few people. I don't understand it. I mean, Deepwater Wind, which is now South Fork Wind, turned into this huge thing, and the shellfish hatchery, big deal. SCALP is like hidden. I don't get it.
Last January, I think it was,
we
that
had
John
a
arranged.
January, and then it all
Came,
went,
But this
and it all went silent.
But you know what, it's not like stuff hasn't been going on here, like a lot of things. How long did the Lazy Point lease situation sit in a committee before we started having meetings publicly?
blaming you.
And that's not unusual, but I think we've reached a stage here where clearly the clock's running. The
Right.
public's asking, is demanding, from what I gather, an answer from the trustees.
But a very small amount of the public.
Yeah.
So how do we get real input?
I think you guys are doing a great job here tonight. I think personally, we have one more meeting in December. I think it'll give time to, between now and then, for our board members to begin to develop a consensus. I would like to hear back from Barley and from John and make an informed decision. And I think hopefully we get a little better attendance from our board so that we can do something. Nobody's coming back and saying, well, gee, I didn't know anything was going on. I think that's reasonable. And
But I do think it's up to not just the trustees, it's the town board also, to say, okay, this is what we want John and Barley to tell SCALP. It's not up to them to decide, because that's 2 people deciding for the whole town of East Hampton.
No, they're liaisons at best. they're taking into consideration what the
Of course
public
you want to
says.
hear their opinions. You want to hear them, but it's their job to represent your opinions and the town board's opinions. That's my opinion.
All right, Tim Garnell? Thank you, John.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Garneau. I'm here as a concerned citizen. I live right on Northwest Harbor, and I was basically agreeing with what Rick said last week as far as putting the floating oyster cages in that harbor. I moor a boat there. I'm on that water all the time. It's very busy. There's sailboats, fishing boats, kayaking, stake fish traps, lobster buoys, whelk buoys. There's, and the marinas in Sag Harbor are getting more and more busy. So these large yachts are now mooring in those waters. So I just really wanted to make a quick comment that I don't think this is the right place for these cages. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Tim.
Tim. Mike Shiano?
Usually the other side of that pole there.
Right here?
Yeah.
Do you want me to put it on one of these?
Why don't we use a chair to put it up on the chair so we
Or
can,
you
the
can-
camera can, oh, the easel. The easel right there.
There you go.
Thank you.
Joan, do you remember this? Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm Mike Shannell with InterScience Research Associates in Southampton, and I'm here to speak about the Creeks property, the Phragmites management that is being proposed there. The Phragmites management project covers 3 different properties, 291, 253, and 249 Montauk Highway in the village of East Hampton. They have been collectively referred to in the past as the Creek properties, so I'm going to be using that term throughout this presentation just to kind of connect it with the previously issued permits. The town trustees initially issued a permit for a Phragmites management at the Creeks in July 2016 under permit GP number 6-16, and that permit was then renewed on July 24th, 2017 under permit GP number 12-17. This current application that I am here to discuss tonight, which was submitted on September 19th of this year, seeks to continue the previously approved work with some minor changes to the description of the proposed project, which I will discuss later. While the work to be done has changed only slightly, the Phragmites management narrative that InterScience has prepared provides some significant improvements to the methods for monitoring the progress of Phragmites management across all 3 of the properties. We also sought to provide specific conditions and definitions within our narrative to provide the regulatory agencies with some peace of mind that the future cuttings will be completed correctly. I worked closely with Jim Walker, the principal planner at InterScience, on the Phragmites management narrative to include cutting heights and techniques that have been the most successful within the past calendar year on other Phragmites management projects that we've had. For this reason, some of the cutting heights specified in the narrative are different from what was approved in the past. I'll cover that more as I describe the project. The Village of East Hampton Zoning Board of Appeals approved the Phragmites cutting on all 3 properties collectively back in June of 2016 for the period of 1 year. We currently have a pending application with them to secure a new permit, and we have been working with the village planner, Billy Hayjack, on addressing questions that the village has about the current conditions at the site. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation issued tidal wetlands permits separately for all 3 properties, and they're still valid until July 17th, 2021. The 12 locations that are shown on the Phragmites management plan were chosen to match the areas of Phragmites shown on the plans that were previously submitted and approved by the Village ZBA, the Town Board of Trustees, and the DEC. We have numbered them to provide a much more clear map of these locations to facilitate the discussion of these areas and to help to track and monitor the progress and success of the management plan when/if the Town Trustees and the Village ZBA issue new permits for the proposed work. We want to make sure that the work is not only completed to the letter of the permit, but also to determine whether the cutting of Phragmites is a successful management tool in all 12 locations. I admit that cutting Phragmites alone may not be enough in every location, but we will need more than a single season of cutting to see how successful it may be across the creeks. To our knowledge, only 2 cuttings of Phragmites have actually taken place, initially in July 2016 and then again in fall of 2016. This was based on monitoring photographs that I found in the DEC files for the project. I'm not sure if those were actually submitted to the trustees at any point, but I found that they were there, so I thought that would be helpful. The permit from the DEC allows the creeks to cut Phragmites 3 times in the first year to a height of 3 inches, and then in subsequent years can be cut to a height of 18 inches twice a year. I spoke with the DEC this summer while we were researching the prior approvals and working on what could be included in this current proposal. They indicated that they would need proof about whether the method of cutting outlined in their conditions had been successful or not before considering a modification. So we proceeded with making applications to the Town Board of Trustees and to the Village ZBA, knowing that there would be additional discussion about the proposed management practices. Since going back to the property on November 7th with Trustee Grimes and with Village Planner Billy Hayjack, I did notice that several locations showed signs that the first 2 cuttings had been successful. However, they all only seemed to happen where the Phragmites had been cut below the standing water levels of Georgia Pond. Specifically, in location 6, much of the Phragmites that were seaward of the seawall have been kept at bay by the waters of Georgia. And there were some locations in, some places in location 8, which is kind of an arm of like a spit of land that juts out into Georgia, where the Phragmites had also been successfully cut. However, between locations 8 and 9, Phragmites have actually grown and kind of joined the 2 areas together. Also at location 12, Trustee Grimes had observed at our meeting that some native vegetation had actually started to grow up in and around the Phragmites. So we know that there are some revisions that need to be made to the management plan and the management narrative, so we do welcome the board's comments. I do plan on going back to the DEC to discuss the conditions with them, but we wanted to get that feedback from the trustees before going back to them so that we have kind of a consensus on what the best way of going about that is. And with that said, I just wanted to go through quickly the details specifically of what we're proposing, just so you can hear what the difference is from the original proposal. The initial cutting of Phragmites includes the hand cutting of Phragmites growth and removal of Phragmites material from the site, as well as the removal of existing Phragmites thatch so as to expose the bare soil. This will allow for full sunlight penetration and germination of existing remaining viable plant seed from each location, which will help to thin out the Phragmites over time. Authorized Phragmites management activities will be undertaken to include only hand cutting, which I describe very much in detail in this management narrative, hand cutting of Phragmites growth and removal of cut Phragmites material, as well as removal of existing Phragmites thatch combined with selective hand cutting and removal of any invasive plants within the wetlands area. No heavy machinery of any kind will be utilized as part of this. Prior to the first cutting, it is proposed that Walbridge surveyors will be asked to stake out the property lines between 291 Montauk Highway and the neighboring properties, which are the Nature Conservancy in the northwestern corner of the property and the northeastern corner, in order to prevent any inadvertent cutting of phragmites on their land. Photographs will be taken at each location prior to the cuttings, as specified on the locations that are specified on the map, and in order to make sure that we know kind of like the baseline of this is before everything was cut in these locations. After the property lines are staked, the phragmites manager activities will, so the narrative was submitted in September, so this is one of the things that will have to be changed, is that I specify that the first cutting would happen in fall of this year, and that has pretty much passed at this point. The activities would include hand cutting as close to the bare soil as possible, which is different from the 3 inches of the first cut that the DEC permit specified. So I'm going to have to discuss that with them and welcome your feedback based on your observations. But as close to the bare soil as possible without removing any actual soil or material. And then all of the Phragmites debris will be removed off-site. Any existing Phragmites thatch will then be removed for the reasons stated previously, and and for the purposes of having any seed that still exists to have the best chance of germinating in spring of 2020. And again, that will probably have to change because it looks like that we're probably not going to do any cutting until probably March of 2020 at this point. After the cutting happens, photographs will be taken in each of the 12 locations, and then a second cutting would occur probably about 6 months after that. So in the narrative, it discusses that that would happen in around March, early April of next year, but it'll probably be that it would then be in fall of 2020 for the second cutting. And at that point, our narrative discusses that it would be a cutting to 3 inches. The DEC permit calls for a cutting of 18 inches for every subsequent cut, so we're going to see what happens with that. Care will be taken not to disturb any native plants during the second cutting in each of the management locations, and the project sponsors will attempt to coordinate the start of any hand cuttings with the opening of Georgia Pond to the Atlantic Ocean, because the lower that we cut the Phragmites, it will allow the waters of Georgia to then to manage them for us, as we've seen already.
We get it.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to be funny, kinda, a little bit, but I'm happy that Jim is on that particular committee, and between the two of you, I know you're gonna knock it right out of the ballpark, really.
Part of the reason why I'm going into so much detail here is because I know that things have not been done to as much of the letter as everyone would like it to be.
Correct.
That's, that's our thing is, it sounds like a wonderful plan. We just want to make sure it gets carried out, and we want a mechanism to check on it.
Right, which is why we've identified the locations, which is why we're going to take photographs to the best of InterScience ability, et cetera, et cetera. I have some photographs from the site meeting that we had that I can pass around if you guys want to look at them. I can submit like official ones at some point.
Thank you.
I know that I've been on this property with Jim in the years past, and there's been, thank you, there's been these long periods of waiting and not knowing, what has been done, and then to speculate that perhaps it was done unbeknownst to us.
Right.
But we're very familiar with your company, and we've had a very good working relationship. And, to reiterate, I know that Jim will be on top of it with the knowledge he has, and of course yourself, and it's actually a good day to hear this, and that your company's part of it. That should open the door and keep it open for us to monitor what's going on.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
So the photographs that I have here show that a lot of replanting has been done, which was in conjunction with approvals from the village ZBA back in April of 2018. And while this area is landward of the mean high water line, so it is technically outside of the trustees' jurisdiction, I do know that it's something that the trustees have been concerned about in the past. It was referenced in the permit in 2017, the renewal. Much of the areas that were previously bare have been revegetated because they were required to do so. Yes, Rick?
Mike, what is your perspective on that, the importance of the buffer?
To what end?
Exactly.
Right. It's definitely important, and not just from the standpoint of the fact that the ZBA required it, and they had to meet that condition, and that at this point they are still confirming the details of whether or not that the ZBA and the village are in agreement that it was done satisfactorily. We are still addressing that with Billy Hayjack. They have some time in order to figure that out. But we do think that it's important.
More from an environmental perspective.
Yes, yeah.
Do you have any perspective to share with us on how this was designed and the plant list and how you feel it will accomplish the objective? I was at the property yesterday and we discussed the hydrology, the direction of the water flow, where the buffer is located, where it is not, and the plant selection list. Anything other than grass looks like it's been eaten by the deer down to a nub. And I don't know what type of retention you're going to have on most of those beautiful plantings. So
Right.
I think that, I know you made a huge effort, but it looks like a lot of it has, not been successful.
Right, much
thus
of the
far.
plantings were,
And that's, in my understanding, those particular bushes were kind of the woody, scrubby, little heavier than just a non-disturbed grass area. So I do think there's legitimate concern that we may not see much of that buffer left come springtime. So, that was just a very general observation in a one-hour walk yesterday with one of your colleagues from Mr. Perlman's team. So, it just seems like there's still work to be done there. Because we do look at the project in totality, and if you're removing Phragmites, that actually is a pretty good absorber of nutrients, how are we balancing that with the upland component of the project?
So much of the plantings were completed at the beginning of this year. So they haven't actually gone through a second growing season yet, so we will have to see how that goes. The village zoning board will still be reviewing the success of that later. So we just for one example, they also are, the creeks have also been tasked with getting permits for and install, I know this is completely outside of the realm that you guys are normally in, but installing IA septic systems for every single building that's on site. So, and that is something that they don't have to necessarily provide proof of that it's been done until April of next year. So it's something that we're going to be working with the village on. So time is still going to kind of tell what it is that, what the success of the plantings that we've already done is. Because as you have noted, we can't tell right now, except for the fact that it looks like that a lot of it has been eaten. I personally don't have a large amount of knowledge about the success and of certain plants and what the plants are and that stuff. I leave a lot of that stuff to Jim Walker of my office. He has way more experience on that than I do. So I'm likely going to be speaking with him about this stuff, but I'm here right now to try and, besides the plantings, to just kind of get your comments, so.
Yeah, the other comment, in the northeast corner, where there's a house near the road, there's no buffer whatsoever. And that was something that I think was part of the earlier discussions. I know we had a little courtesy section to the west of the main house.
Okay.
But in that area, there just seems to be a complete lack
Okay.
thereof.
Can I visited the site with Mike a few weeks ago and Billy Hayjack. It was nice walk. I want to bring some of the other board members up to speed on the history of this property, because some of our board members, Susan, I don't think you were on the board when this project started. 2016, we did issue a Phragmites cutting permit on this property. It was one cut. I think it was towards the end of the season. The following season, we had a fairly high water in Georgia Pond. That was an excuse that was used why the cutting didn't occur until much later that year. When the cutting finally did, the second cutting did occur, the applicant took it upon themselves to actually clear property that was not either owned by us or them. They cleared Nature Conservancy property. Subsequent to that, there was the big issue of the illegal structures, the multiple code violations on the balance of the property. Before we even got to that, okay, there were issues here. When this property was, when the application for the cutting permit was originally applied for, we had this, I'd say, a schematic plan for revegetation that was going to be done, and that was one of the selling points of the Phragmites cutting, because quite frankly, our concern at that time was a very, can I just run over here? Sure. Was there was a pretty good size area that actually was mowed lawn. This entire area down here was actually mowed at that time as lawn, okay, and was treated as such. The only thing that brought that out of sort of the mowed lawn look was it was underwater for a good part of the first year of the Phragmites cutting, okay? When we visited the property for the renewal, and Brian, I believe you were with me, at that time, none of the revegetation work had actually occurred that was committed to. There was a smattering of some native shrubs which were really inappropriate to the hydrology that were dead. And the conditions our board put on the renewal, where we gave the creeks a 6-month permit, at the end of which time they were to provide us with a revegetation plan for the upland areas. Even though it's not in our jurisdiction, our concern, and it still is, that whatever goes on upland has an immediate impact on Georgia Pond, and some sort of buffer does need to be there. We never received that plan, okay? The other condition of the permit was 1 year after the Phragmites cutting occurred. They would have had to have implemented the plan that we approved. We have never gotten a plan that we've approved. The planting work that was done there was done with no approval from us, but they didn't need approval from us. But again, as a courtesy, I asked for a plan the day we were there and a list of what was put in. We do not have that. While I was there, we have a deer fence, which was installed after Brian, you and I were there, which has all pressure-treated posts. And that deer fence extends for several hundred feet. It's not shown on this plan here, which is outside of our jurisdiction, but well within the jurisdiction of the village. They have an issue with it. That has to be brought up.
There's no permit for it?
There is a
By the village?
permit for it, but it was
The
not.
village approved to, well, the village required that they move it. There was no specific timeline on that specific one, but it is being remedied right now because it needs to be shown on the survey as being in the correct location.
And it also has pressure-treated posts. And again, the village, I believe.
Required metal posts within 125 feet of the wetlands.
Yes.
So that's going to be changed as well.
Could I see the pictures of the property that you have?
Okay.
Thanks.
So my recommendation to our board is on this project to proceed with some caution and basically to require the prior conditions we had before, enforce those conditions. Let's get a plan of what was put in My concern on the day that we walked around is even though a lot of the plantings, yes, they are native plants, they are not plants that you would find within 100 miles of this site. They are atypical of a habitat like this. And the goal here is for a long-term success. And unfortunately, my concern here is, as this landscape matures, this revegetation planting will not. And what's Plan B? Okay, when the bearberry that likes it high and dry, that's been planted literally in the wetland, when that fails, what's Plan B? What's going in? What's the long-range plan for this property? I am all in favor of a Phragmites cutting plan here. I want to see one. I want to see permits issued on it, but I do not want to see permits issued on something that we're going to be embarrassed about a year into them. I want to make sure that we've dotted the i's, we've crossed the t's. First and foremost, I would like to see you guys completely compliant with the conditions that the village ZBA placed on this property, to include the IA systems. I don't really care about the April deadlines. If this has to wait until after April next year to review this project as a result of that, we can wait. My feeling is this: Phragmites is an invasive plant, yes, okay, but right now Phragmites is a nutrient sink. It is absorbing some of the nutrients that are flowing off of this property. It is acting as a buffer, and in the absence, as Rick pointed out, in the most easterly property, in the absence of a buffer, a real measurable buffer, the Phragmites actually has a function here. So, Mike, I want to support this, but the only way I'm going to support this is if we do this step by step.
I understand.
With a real plan, and when I say a plan, not a schematic, species, size, location, quantity, real plans. Because when we went over there that day, the day that we walked the site, the homeowner's representative was on site. When asked, what exactly did you plant, he couldn't tell us. He said, I'll get you the plant list. We don't have it yet.
Right. So part of the reason why I have not submitted it yet was because we had been trying to have kind of either a discussion or a meeting before this meeting actually took place, so that maybe we'd be able to have a list of the things that we would be able to supply to you. But that had to be pushed off, and Rick was not able to get to the property. So I am now here to write down these things.
Okay.
So it's really that we wanted to have kind of an official list from you so that I can then go back and check it off as we go through. Because I think that those types of things are helpful for everyone. Part of this, I'll just say that we will get you a plan, and we will get you a list of plans that were installed, and then the trustees will be able to comment further from there.
I have a quick question for you, looking at the pictures.
Just real quick, the photos that you are looking at are from last November. The ones I gave to Rick were from this.
Oh, all right. I had a question about the fencing. Is this the deer fencing you were referring to?
Yes.
The green fence?
Probably. Let me just.
Here it is.
Oh, no.
No,
That's
that's
another-
like yard guard.
Because this looks like it's only about 4 feet.
Yeah,
5
4-foot yard guard, plastic-coated wire fencing,
That may be just
temporary.
temporary or a safety concern to make sure that people don't
Sure,
fall into the pond.
that makes sense,
Mike, are
yeah.
you using a
During construction.
contractor to plant, or is it the in-house staff?
So the plan is to use the in-house staff, but that, especially for the Phragmites management, we would hire, or they would hire, a person to oversee the work that's being done. Because from the discussions that I have had with them, it is important for everyone to have this done correctly this time. So that is the plan right now. If that changes, I will let you know. But that is how it is described in the narrative.
And who is recommending the plans? Is that Jim, or is that?
No, the person that had designed the planting plan, his name is Chris Davies, and he works for McAndrews Forbes, who is the company that manages the site on behalf of the owner. And that plan was approved by the village ZBA. There had been subsequent discussions about the plan and what had, because some areas during the period of time between April of 2018 and when they started planting, a lot of the native vegetation had started to grow back in some areas, so then they kind of try to supplement things in some places. So I think that's one of the reasons why that providing a plan before this meeting was not something that we could necessarily do.
Well, Mike, I'm all that methodology of basically, supplementing a recovering population. The concerns I had there was the plants that were installed, with the exception of the clethra, which, by the way, that's one of the plants that the deer ate the most of, really had no relevance to the property at all. I mean, yes, they're native plants, but, you can take a Colorado spruce from Colorado and say that it is a native plant. But if you plant it along, in a wetland like this, I think we can all agree that plant probably is visually out of place, but more importantly, functionally, it's out of place. And that was what I found the most discouraging here, is the very plants that were represented on the site weren't repeated very much. That we have plants like redbud, Cercis canadensis, which is a nice sort of riparian species that you would typically find growing along riverbanks and stuff in upstate New York and Pennsylvania and that. But it's not a plant we're going to find out here. The sweet bay magnolia. It's it's a very nice plant, but it is not like a coastal community plant, and it's those kinds of things that concern me as a board member here. We have to look at these things in terms of their long-term function, and this is a buffer. The buffer was intended to perform a function in the landscape, and if the buffer isn't successful, and if the native species are either removed or discouraged, long-term, how's it going to work? And then the second thing to that is, as we pointed out, there was absolutely what appeared to be no maintenance or attempt to maintain or manage the plants that were put in. The areas that were once lawn have now actually recovered, but a lot of it not with native vegetation. A lot of it has recovered with like Japanese stilt grass, mile a minute, and other non-native species. So there's a big hole in this whole program here, and I don't know that we can enforce this on you, but I think for the benefit of the success for this, I think I would write a more comprehensive management plan for all of these native areas spelled out in the ZBA accommodation and your Phragmites cutting program, because I see it as a potential problem a very short time into this permit, is how is recovering native vegetation going to be identified? How's it going to be dealt with? Because this is all being handled by their in-house staff. And some other companies, some outside companies that do this kind of work on a regular basis have set protocols within their offices, or consistent with other projects. You don't have that sort of institutional memory on this property.
there might be some local assets you could reach out to. You know, Natural Resources Department or something, provide, you know, does things like revegetation plans. Or there might be
Our office,
some local knowledge would be.
yeah, our office in Jim Walker has a plethora of knowledge
Yeah,
about the nature.
I'm gonna be honest, Mike, I'm not concerned
Right,
about
right.
InterScience's ability
Right.
to develop a cogent revegetation plan for this property.
Right. The question is going to wind up being whether, is whether the one that we submit to you will be accepted. So.
My concern, honestly, is that we all recognize, I think, that a lot of the planning here is out of your control. It's not being done in your wheelhouse, and clearly, when we walked that property, that was not a plan that was developed by InterScience.
And part of that was just, actually, no, that's not what I'm going to say. Much of the plans that were prepared were discussed with the village during, and then approved by the village. So I'm just going to have to speak with the Greeks and also with Billy Hayjack and come to some consensus. At the same time, the village, the Board of Trustees does normally issue permits only for a period of about 6 months, correct?
No, our board typically there for a year.
Right.
This became an exception when the first round of Phragmites removals had begun to go awry, and we really weren't staying within bounds of the permit. We renewed it conditional on a revegetation plan, like I said, that we never received, because basically what happened is everything was interrupted, first by the violations. Subsequent to the violations, it was again interrupted by the most recent fire and stuff over there.
Right.
So we recognize the circumstances under which this occurred, but it doesn't change the facts that these were the things that we had asked for 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should still continue to ask for.
Okay.
Just one last observation. I noticed the same plants were either sitting in 6 to 8 inches of water or were in relatively dry areas. So, when you're there, just take a look, because just from a kind of a common sense perspective, it just seems like we've got a homogeneous run of the same plants through different topography. It's very wet over on that west side, as you know, and I do think some diversity there is important. It's just not gonna make it.
Right.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, I'm still a little bit unclear on where exactly you stand with the village ZBA right now. What exactly are they requiring to bring you into compliance with village code or with your negotiations with them?
Currently, they have asked us to provide them with a survey that shows the locations of all of the, not the location, but the current edge of clearing. Because all of the plantings have been completed, we have to provide them with a survey that shows that, and also a survey that shows that all of the fencing has been moved. So we are currently preparing that, and then once we submit that to the village, they will have to review it and determine whether the application is complete for them to put it onto their hearing. So that probably won't happen until like February, I would think, to be on their hearing, just based on public hearing dates and how all that noticing stuff works. So, but we should have the survey sometime in December, I would think.
And what about the IA systems?
The IA systems we have approvals from the health department. They are currently adjusting the approvals to have a more, there are a number of IA systems that have been approved by the county for use. And as time has gone on since the original systems were proposed, better systems and more reliable systems have come out, so they're currently getting that revised to have these new ones be the ones that are going to be the ones that are installed. They are required to, the property is going to be required to have those in by April of 2020.
Okay. And lastly, where are you as far as your attempt to amend the current DEC permit that's valid through 2021? Are you still going to amend it, it sounds like?
I will be. I wanted to hear some comments from the trustees before going.
Actually, Mike, to kind of help you with your proposal to the DEC, there is a meeting scheduled with myself, Billy Hayjack, I believe Brian Frank, and somebody from Kim Shaw's office to go over the present, like how the language that the DEC puts into their permit, puts into their permits right now, and the aspects of those conditions that really aren't functional. The goal is to try and, reduce the Phragmites, cutting to 18 inches.
Right.
I think everybody that's done that and has complied strictly with the permits knows that they've just trained Phragmites to grow at 18 inches.
Essentially.
Yeah. Looks like
especially if it winds up not being, on smaller properties, it works really well to then also have a planting plan that goes with it, but when, to plant over top of the Phragmites, but when it's a larger area, it winds up being a little more.
Yeah, and you know what, there's no reason why some of these areas won't recover all on their own.
Right.
Subsequent planting may not be necessary, except in the areas where you have, let's say, perhaps another invasive like stilt grass or that is so suppressing, the vegetation trying to make a comeback that it's unable to.
When is that meeting that you're going to have?
It's in the next few weeks.
Okay. So you want a planting plan?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Just the missing buffer up by location 11 and 12.
Right. Those properties, because they were not part of the, I'm part of the Village Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, because they're technically two separate properties. Then they were not required as part of that application, so.
They were either had no or were very low on the violation side of things. I think they got skipped.
Understood. Do you want me to submit any additional copies of the photographs from our meeting?
If you want to, that's not a bad thing. I took photographs the day we were over there as well. It would be nice to have them in the file. So yes, thank you. If you want to send them digitally, that's fine.
Will do. So, okay, I will try to get stuff back to you, and I guess we'll just kind of be in touch. And
we'll be in touch. I'm in communication with Bill. I know there's issues that you're trying to settle with the village, and I think we're going to hold back until some of those issues with the village are settled.
Okay.
So that we know that you're in compliance, they're comfortable, and then we can move ahead with our permits.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. Is there anybody else who wants to address the board? Okay, we'll move on to old business. New business, is there anyone who has new business? Great. Old business, I added this on tonight. We're closing out the town's budget within our office, and we have $4,000 left on the professional, outside consultant line. And we can apply that to the Borner Whalen project. The only problem is we submitted it, and we took a vote to hire these guys, but we never passed the resolution. They want to see the resolution, so Brian's going to offer that tonight.
Okay, good. All right, so I have a resolution to be read, and it says, whereas the East Hampton Town Trustees claim title to Little Northwest Creek, Scoy Pond, and other properties in northwest section of the town of East Hampton. The board agreed it is important that research be done concerning the history of these properties. Whereas Steve Bonner, archivist, and Richard Whalen, attorney, responded to the trustees' RFP for historic research. Resolved, at the East Hampton Town Trustee meeting August 26, 2019, a motion was made by Rick Drew to accept the joint proposal for Phase 1 as submitted by Steve Warner and Rick Whalen, with progress reports, a year-end report, and a presentation being given to the board, and an allowance of the deadline to be extended if needed. This motion was seconded by Jim Grimes and unanimously approved. And be it further resolved, the East Hampton Town Trustees, and there's some math here that I can't read, to pay Steve Warner $15,000 and $8,500 to Richard Whalen. That's it.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Great,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, East Inlet at Napeague Harbor.
Okay. Not much has really happened with that since our last meeting with Drew Bennett. We have, John was very good. He put together an application for Conic Estuary for a grant for some of the study work. What I would like to ask this board is how they felt about soliciting a proposal from Drew Bennett for some of that work, so we have some gauge in terms of what the values are attached to this. Because I really don't, this I feel is an important project. I don't want to let it go by the wayside. And, considering our finances, we may, depending on what the budget is, wish to proceed in lieu of the grant or
Well,
before
what
the grant.
exactly are you asking him for?
Well, I'd like to be able to go and solicit a proposal and a cost estimate.
For engineering?
For
Basic
engineering, for
phase
basic
one.
engineering and
Site map.
site map and that.
Any hydrology
Well,
included?
yeah, it's
Okay.
gonna have to be something comprehensive. We're
Yeah.
not doing the work.
No, I
And I'm not
understand.
spending any
We
money.
need to know what it's going to cost to do the project down the road.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
think,
Yeah, he was pretty helpful in laying out the components of what was required
Yeah.
for Little Northwest Creek, and it really gave us some good insight into the cost and the moving parts and everything that's needed, so he's
And
got a pretty good take on this stuff.
We've heard
think it's the
numbers of $1
beginning.
million to
So,
$5 million
something we have to do.
$10 million, so I think we should
well,
get an idea of what
that's a problem. We don't even know what
Right.
sort of the scope of the engineering side of this is.
Mm-hmm.
And, we did this with Little Northwest Creek. So far, it seemed to work pretty well, because it gave everybody, a sense, one, that something's happening, and also gave everybody sort of a roadmap of what the next steps should be.
All right, so are you making a motion?
Yeah,
And I'll second it.
okay.
All in
It's
favor?
not, I'm not spending any money, guys. Yeah.
No, these are long-term projects, they take time to get rolling, so it's good to do the homework.
Do you have a basic idea of what to expect?
Okay, committee reports. Aquaculture,
Yes. All right, I have the Stony Brook University School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences Water Quality Assessment of East Hampton Town Trustee Waters in 2019 that I brought from last year with Dr. Gobler. So the question at present is to vote to authorize 3 additional microbial source tracking DNA testing samples from Accabonac Harbor to be analyzed, and there is a fee attached to that of an extra $7,500, which we voted to include Accabonac Harbor last year, but we never completed the actual vote. as to the additional cost. He's about to start his analyzation of 3 Mile Harbor. We have 3 units in 3 Mile Harbor and 3 at Accabonac Harbor.
Can I say something? The only reason I'd be opposed to this, at first blush, Accabonac Harbor is so big that this particular work is generally, if I'm not mistaken, in smaller bodies of water. No?
No, we have 1 at the culvert and 2 in the north. And we wanted to see in the north end if, John is particularly interested in seeing if we can open up the north end
Right.
for shellfishing.
This is the one we did down at Georgia that identifies the contributing animal groups that are to the coliforms.
As opposed to just the
We
normal.
did 2 in 3 Mile Harbor, and
So, Brian,
It's
the
already
real issue here
been
is
done,
we already-
but not been analyzed yet.
Chris's original proposal to us included the testing of 3 samples from 1 site. Into the season, we asked him to also take samples from Accabonac Harbor. So we have the ability to choose whether we want to do Accabonac or 3 Mile Harbor under the existing contract, or we can pay the additional $7,500 to get the additional 3 samples done.
Could you not repeat the exercise, or did Dr. Gobler want to go back to the same body of water?
That's the next
No,
discussion.
this is just to analyze the
Yeah, the next
samples.
discussion is to actually have a meeting with Dr. Gobler where we will present and discuss with him what we want to do going forward, because there are several organizations that are doing testing of the same exact bodies of water.
You may be articulating the same concerns we have. Is we've been adding to Dr. Gobler every year, and it's gotten pretty significant. And I think with some of the other stakeholder groups, CCOM, the Accabonac Surfrider, Accabonac Protection Committee, there's some DEC, there's some real redundancies going on in the testing. I would like to make a motion that we approve it, conditional on, before we sign up for 2020, that we basically sit down with Dr. Gobler, with the other groups, and see if we can't manage the expenses here a bit better and spend our money more wisely, because I don't think we can keep going the way we are, where we're just adding stuff. I think we've got to be a little more focused on how and where
Sounds good, yeah.
we're spending our
Well, that's the next thing. After we went, if we approve this evening, my next thing was to get Dr. Gobler, and even if we had to go to his lab and sit down and talk with him, and then discuss what we would like to see done in the next coming year, and then have group meetings with the other organizations. I think we should establish what we want to do first, before we have all the other establishments come in. I think we can have 2 meetings.
Still got to get coordinated.
Yeah.
There's no reason we're doing the same work the DEC is doing.
He's ready to do his analyzation, and so he'd like to know as soon as possible, obviously. So if we can vote on just this aspect tonight, I will,
You make
Have
a
a
motion,
motion.
Jim? I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. And this, again, is for the microbial source tracking. Okay, terrific, thank you.
All right, Georgia Ponds Committee, we just did. Harbor Management Committee, Clearwater Beach Property Owners Association application for 20, didn't we do this last week?
We did 2018.
Okay.
Right, this is
Talked
for the
about
new dredging.
2019. Chris, you were working on that? Did we finish 2019's language?
I believe we did. I don't have a copy of it with me, so let me take a look at it, but yeah, we
Right.
finished that up.
Isn't 2019 ending?
Well, yeah, they want
We
to
have to
do
get it
the
done
dredging
by the end of December.
post-haste, so,
Their limit with the DEC is December 31st. They have to have it dredged.
yeah, so
Okay.
they're in a tight window
All right.
here.
Can we vote to make sure that,
Well, do we have a
You can
copy?
release it.
We're not looking at a copy of the application or the language. That was,
subject to,
yeah.
This is a, we have all our past issues resolved with them.
Chris had something pretty complete. You were just asking.
We do this every year. This is an
property owners'
annual
opinion,
project.
right?
We're going to do the up to limit is one of the.
Yeah, see, we still haven't, we really still, this is the old permit.
Languages.
The language hasn't been changed. Hey, could we do this? Would this be possible with the board? is to approve this conditionally, or no, we can't approve it, to distribute the amended permit to everyone, and could we possibly weigh in on this online?
I have no problem with that.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we do that, because really,
Well, we're in favor of them doing this, we just need to get the language correct.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what we're
that's
doing, right?
This is an annual project. They've done it every year, we approve it every year.
yeah,
Of course.
Weigh-in,
Okay.
maybe do a weigh-in Thursday afternoon or something,
Yeah.
Thursday evening. So by Friday, we can release the
they-
permit to
they-
them.
because I really would like to wait until our
say
first,
wait.
our next
Here, I
meeting for
have
this.
my copy from last
Well,
meeting, and I highlighted
It
some things.
changes.
No, I
Yeah,
know,
but
I
can I
wrote
tell
down
you
the
what?
changes that
I don't
you
think-
put
I
in.
don't
I
think-
have yours on my phone, you have it, I mean.
This is,
check
I
your
wrote down
email.
changes that you
have an
had.
email
Really
address?
just the
We had
last
discussed.
page where you
Can I give
added
this to
the
Chris?
Yes,
Because he's
please.
writing it.
You can have it.
conditions, yeah, let's pull it up.
I make notes on,
I would like to just make a motion that we see the finished document. We vote on this via email.
Can we do
second.
this conditionally tonight?
You know, just approve it,
We
approve
could
it
approve it
subject to,
conditionally, as long as we ultimately approve it. What I really don't want to do here, guys, I don't want to approve something here that winds up being not what we all wanted, and then a year from now, I don't want to
Go
find
through the same
ourselves
thing.
in a battle with the homeowners
Right.
So
group
Chris, will-
over,
We have some specific guidelines.
You know what, let's do
Right.
this, let's table this for a little while here, even this evening, and we'll discuss at the end, because I know I worked on this and sent a copy out, maybe it just went to Arlene, so.
It's really
No, I
just
don't have
one
a copy,
page
but-
of your conditions, it's not long if we
Right.
fill it up, it's, could be read,
Yeah, I'm just not seeing it here on
Paragraphs.
my email.
yeah.
so I think your idea, Jim, was a good one, just to send it by email, and we can just all chime in and vote on it that way.
yeah, I thought we were going to get a copy of this, honestly. And maybe we did.
I don't have it, so. But the good news is we're all in favor of moving it along, so they can get it
yeah, but
done.
if they're,
Is this it,
They're
Rick?
just fighting the clock a little bit.
they want to wait, force them to wait till after the 8th. If it's
This is still last
time
week's copy.
constrained.
All right, moving on. Nappy Lazy Point, application from Devon Yacht Club.
As far as I know, that's still in the same situation. We're waiting for them to get their DEC, and then Jim Walker and I are going to get in and look at that, just because if there's going to be some changes made, rather that we knew about that ahead of time. So that they don't have to go back and amend, you know, if DEC approves something different, now we're in that situation where you basically have two different plans have been approved. We're trying to stay clear of that.
So that's tabled. 3 Mile Harbor, notice of commencement from 3 Mile Harbor breakwater emergency repairs for the eastern breakwater. West breakwater cap was completed on 11/15.
Yeah, Bill and I were talking about that, and I will defer to Bill. He seemed to have a pretty good handle on it.
They were down there working. The rocks have been delivered, they're moving forward.
I understand that, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, the west portion of that is complete, I believe?
I think they replaced the cap, on the west side, they just replaced the top of the bulkhead.
Okay.
They put a metal mesh down instead of the wood that kept getting knocked off.
And everybody should be aware, there is a staging project, Baby's Beach, is where they've got material and some fairly big boulders, so, you know, the public just needs to be a little patient. That's it.
Yeah.
They're making some progress. The chinking that's kind of in the middle of the jetty, I think, is going to be pretty accessible, but I think they're also going to try and do some work towards the end of the jetty. It's going to be interesting to see how successful they are getting out to the end of that jetty. So it's something we may want to take a peek at when.
Yeah, it's interesting, I got some photographs I could send to the file.
I want to just go back for 1 second and ask, when I speak to Dr. Gobler, when, December looks like a rough month for many of us, going away. So, on the board for Gobler, I can't remember, who do we have as a committee to discuss the contract with him as to what we wish to
It
have?
covers a couple
I've
different
spoken with him
territories.
before.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, we could do a con call with him, that's usually easier with him. to
In
do
the
a
office,
conference call.
as we did, I think we did that last time, didn't we?
We can just do it on a, I have a
All right.
conference call set
Should
up.
I wait until January with him? I'll give him a call this week,
it's
but I
gonna
can
make
say
more sense.
January is a good, when we're back in order? Okay.
we just want to refine and coordinate all the
Right.
sampling projects.
And then we'll meet with the other organizations.
In the past, we've waited till you have him give his report also to see where he is.
Yes, I'll inquire for that as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to administrative. Paying of the bills, we have one bill, Staples, $94.86.
I'd like to make a motion to pay that.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. We have no minutes. Financial report for the month ended October 31st, 2019.
Been waiting for you, Brian, on this.
You know what, I did have an opportunity to look at it. I know the ladies worked very hard at putting it together. I don't see anything wrong with it. Having said that, I'd make a motion at this time to accept the October 2019 balance sheet that you just spoke about.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we have
Financial
the
statement now?
financial statement from Norwalk Smith ended December 31st, 2018.
Come on, you.
Anybody look at that?
Is this,
Yeah.
I try
This
and
is
stay
this?
clear of that stuff.
Well, we have to vote to
Yes.
accept it or not.
Okay.
You get it by the next meeting, the last meeting, we
Yeah.
can do it.
Yeah,
but is this the, is this
I have some extras if anyone wants.
yeah, if you want to give me an extra
Yeah.
one, I
Brian,
definitely,
please pass this over to
I'll
Jim.
read it on my way home
Okay.
tonight.
So the goal is, next meeting, which I believe is our last meeting, we will
December 9?
decide if we're going to accept it.
I know, how it's been going month to month to month.
Does anybody have anything else?
No, I'd like to,
Are we revisiting the permit before we adjourn?
Up to Chris.
All righty. December 9.
Will there be any other gifts coming my way? Because that will determine if I'm going to show
Brian,
up
I
in
was gonna,
December.
I was gonna give you some honey, but you're gonna have to show up for the December meeting to get it.
Fair enough?
December 9.
Okay.
That was funny, wasn't it? Is that it?
Wait, no, Chris is looking at that.
Oh,
Oh, you might have Chris's copy. I might have printed it and put it in there.
I don't have it.
I'm not seeing it in my email, guys. I know I worked on this last
I
week when we
printed it,
finished
you
on
made
this.
some changes and I
Looking
read
for
it.
the permit for,
Let me, I'll shoot over the draft for everybody,
for
you know, by
the
tomorrow.
Clearwater Beach. Good night, Tim. See you soon. December 9th is our last meting.
too late to back out.
Can we agree on the language via email?
Yes, shall we vote on that?
I would like to.
Okay, so did you make your resolution? I'll second it.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve this
Or not.
pending our agreement in the language,
Okay.
which Chris will get out to us.
Go Friday.
Everybody agree?
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Yeah, you too.
Please,
right.
please look for that email and respond.
Yes.
Will do.